Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before I begin, I just want to say that on behalf of the youth, we want to thank all the organizers of the ICSA convention for taking the decision to make all of these talks more focused around the youth. We have enjoyed it a lot. We have taken a lot from it as well. And I'd also like to thank all the speakers who have traveled many miles to come here and share their knowledge with us. And we really appreciate all of it. Okay, so the topic that we'll be discussing today is the Institute of Marriage. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a clear guideline on who to choose as our partner, because that is where the Institute of Marriage has to begin. In Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 221, he says, "Do not marry mushrik women until they believe. A slave woman who believes is better than a free woman who does not believe, even though the latter may appear very attractive to you. Likewise, do not wed your woman to mushrik men until they believe. A slave man who believes is better than a free man who does not believe, even though the latter may be very pleasing to you." The mushrik people invite you to the fire, while Allah by His grace invites you to the gardens and His pardon. He makes His revelations plain to the people so that they should learn a lesson and follow the admonition. Discussing the topic further will be Imam Khaid Gridgs. He graduated with a political sciences degree from Harvard University. He is on the board of trustees for the Parliament of the World's Religions. He is a founding member of Muslims for Social Justice, and he is also a human rights activist. We are indeed very lucky and fortunate to have such a knowledgeable speaker with us here today, and I'd like to hand over to Imam Khaid Gridgs.
Excuse me. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. I will not put you to the test today by speaking for a long time. My voice is a little not too good this morning, and so I won't torture you by having to listen to me cough and do all of this in the presentation. Inshallah, it will get a little better as I speak just a little bit longer here. Before beginning, I want to say that, quite honestly, I have been working, doing Islamic work with the ICNA president, Brother Brother Naeem, since the 1990s. And quite honestly, I did not know that he could make a presentation in Urdu, honestly. And I have some Spanish speaking Muslim friends, and I joke with them all the time because they'll start speaking in English and they'll go back to Spanish, and we call it Spanglish because they just go back and forth. So it's this Urglish where you go back and forth from Urdu to English. Brothers and sisters, I want to talk with you briefly about marriage. This is something that all of us have some familiarity with. If you are a young person who's unmarried, so often many of the young men come to me at the mosque where I am in North Carolina and say that it's that time. And that time, when they say that it's that time, they mean that their parents, either the mother or father, has come to them and said that it's that time. Whether you've been thinking about getting married or not, it is now that time for you to get married. I also work as an associate chaplain at a university in North Carolina. And so often the graduating seniors feel a lot of pressure to get married because for them, from their parents, it's that time. We allowed you to go all the way to university to complete your studies, but now is the time for you to get married and to be serious about your marriage. But I want to say to the young men and the young ladies who may have a little more time. It may not be your time right now, but to actually get married, but it is your time to start thinking very seriously about the institution of marriage. Because if you wait until your parents, or if you wait until you feel that now is the time for me to get married, and you have not paid the proper attention to understanding the most important aspect and dimension that you bring into this marriage, you've waited too late. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has made it so clear that there are different reasons why a man should get married. What kind of wife will you select? And the Prophet ﷺ has given us about 4 things that said that when it's time, and when you're ready to get married, when you're about to get married, and you're about to select a wife, that there's certain qualities that you can marry someone for. They're all halal. He said that you can marry a sister because of her beauty, that she's so attractive, that her beauty is just so overwhelming to you that you want to marry her, not just in some kind of lustful way, but you want her to be the mother of your children. You want to marry her because of her beauty. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that's halal. If this is what attracts you the most, then okay, you can do that. You can marry a sister because of her standing in society. She may have a social standing. Her standing may be such that you feel that if I marry this sister, then our family unit will become so strong that her status is something that is attractive. And the Prophet ﷺ said, that's halal, if that's what you want to do. You can marry a sister, according to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, for her wealth. You can say, well, I want my Khadijah, like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had his Khadijah. I want a sister who has her own wealth, who doesn't have to depend so much upon my income because she's independently wealthy. And the Prophet ﷺ also said, that's okay. That's halal as well. But if you're not at that point where you're already married and you have time to consider what are those things, what are the qualities, what is that one quality that I want in a spouse? The Prophet ﷺ said to marry someone based on their deen, based on their religion, that you're attracted to them not so much by the way that she looks. You're not trying to find the most unattractive person, but it's not because of the way that she looks that's attractive to you. It's not her standing, it's not her wealth, it's not the beauty, it's none of those things, but it's because of her deen. And so if you wait until it's time for you to get married, to start trying to figure out what did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mean by saying marry someone based on her religion, her deen, then you've waited too late. You've missed the opportunity to be that person that would be equally yoked with your spouse, to be that person who understands what is important in a marriage. What does it mean, excuse me, to be a sister, a brother of faith? What can you bring into this institution? Thank you so much. This institution of marriage. Brothers and sisters, marrying a sister based on her faith, based on her religion, is the best thing that you can ever have. Let me give you an example. Unfortunately for me, I've been married twice in my life. I married the first time when I was 20 years old. And I married while I was still in college. And when I first married, I was not even Muslim because I was raised as a Christian. And it was about a year and a half before the sister that I married actually became Muslim. And we stayed together and were married for 10 years, about 10 and a half years. And I had 3 daughters with this particular sister. But the attraction that we originally had to one another was very different than what developed 10 and a half years later, because there was no religious factor, there was no consideration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that originally brought us together. There were other things that brought us together. And as I grew as a Muslim and as my commitment to Islamic work grew, I found that the person that I've actually had as a girlfriend since we were 14 years old, we started to grow in different directions. And so as much as I loved my wife at that time, as much as I cared for her at that time, we were going in totally different directions. And astaghfirullah, the sister ended up coming out of hijab. She ended up even leaving Islam. But she was a wonderful mother to my children. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it was time, and it was now my time, because I knew how important marriage was to complete my deen. And so now I'm looking for a sister, and I'm not looking for the same things now, because I'm a different person than I was that 10 and a half years ago, and I'm looking for a wife. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I won't go through this process of getting married, because I was about to go into the Caribbean because a friend of mine had married a sister from the Caribbean, and she had a biological twin. He said that she's just like that, and everyone said that his wife was such a good Muslim sister. So I said, well, maybe this identical biological twin might be the person that I'm looking for. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just stopped me from doing this. And there was this sister in the Muslim community who was a hard-working sister. She was so dedicated to the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She was selfless in her work. And I never ever thought about this sister as a potential spouse. And so finally, as I'm traveling to this city and that city, one of my friends in the masjid said, well, Brother Khalid, well, what about Sister Sophia here? I mean, she's single. She's committed to Islam. She loves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah finally lifted the veil. And so I can personally attest to being attracted to someone because of their deen. And 35 years later, I can stand here and say that I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah put it in my heart to understand the importance of marrying a sister because of her love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, her love of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that those other considerations have become so unimportant to me. I didn't marry her again because for any reason other than what I saw in her as her love of Allah. And it could never compare to the marriage that I had for 10 and a half years. So don't wait until it's your time to get married before you start taking the commitment of being a good spouse. And specifically to the brothers. Let me share another little quick anecdote, and I'll sit down here in a minute. Another quick story. As the Imam of community, I would dare say that most or much of my experiences within the mosque are some form of domestic counseling. And when brothers are ready to get married, so many of them come to me, yes, Imam, I want a good Muslim sister. I want a good, very good sister. I want you to connect me with a very good sister. You know the people in the community, and people come from across the state. We know you know the people in your community. Now connect us with a good sister. And my response always to these brothers are, how good of a brother are you? I mean, you want to be connected with a sister who is so good as a Muslimah, but how good of a brother are you? Because if you're out in the streets and you're not caring about protecting your deen, I'm not going to be a part of trying to connect you with a sister who is guarding her chastity, who is studying Islam, who's serious about her commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what I'm seeing in you is just a total disregard for what you're supposed to be about as a Muslim brother. Let me share one other thing with you. Because of the predominance of young people that we have in the room today, I'm going to kind of divert from what I had intended to say to talk about an issue as it affects marriage that not just in the United States, but around the world, that the institution of marriage is under a kind of assault and attack that it has never been under, probably in the history of this institution of marriage. In the history of marriage, the institution of marriage has not been under the kind of attack that it is today. The conservative Christians in the United States, those few who have not just relented to this pressure that the institution of marriage is under, they say that Islam, that marriage was an institution that brought together Adam and Eve, and not Adam and Steve. And what they mean by this, that a marriage, according to the definition that was brought to us by all of the prophets, is a coming together of a male and a female, not two men, not two women, and saying that this is marriage. In the United States, in every one of the 50 states in the United States, because of a federal mandate, men can marry men and women can marry women legally in every state of the United States, without exception. No matter how much the individual states and the local climates and the local sensitivities were saying, we're not having this in our state, it came from over the top with the federal government saying that yes, everywhere where two men or two women want to marry, you have to issue them a marriage license in the same way that you would do a man and a woman. This assault is not just limited to the United States, because the United States government has pressured many countries on the African continent and threatened them with withholding aid, withholding military support or financial aid, if in fact they do not allow for these kinds of marriages, if they have laws that go against homosexuality. And so the kind of imperialism, the kind of cultural imperialism that is coming from the United States today is something that is weakening the institution of marriage all around the world. And as I said, what stands out so much about the African continent, that regardless of how we may feel about individual presidents of certain countries on this continent of Africa, it has only been the presidents for the most part of African countries have stood against the United States and say that we don't care what you do in your country, but you are not going to mandate and dictate to us how we describe and how we deal with this institution of marriage. And so in closing, let me just say this just as a warning to our young brothers and sisters. Because as I said, I've never in my adult life or in my youth ever seen the kinds of assaults that are coming on marriage that are being led by the United States today. In elementary schools, in the youngest grades, when children are first entering in their formal educational lives, in the United States, now in public schools, there are books talking about, in the first state that I believe that started this was in the state of New York. And in these elementary school books, they were showing family units. And they would say, like, Billy has two mommies, or Alice has two daddies. And what they're showing is that Billy's two mommies are married to each other. They're two women who are married, and Billy's and Alice's two other, same thing, but they are same-sex marriages. And this is being promoted at the elementary school age. And so I just give a word of caution to our young Muslims. Please don't fall victim to the pressure of either a political agenda, because in the United States, a progressive agenda almost demands, except for the Muslims, it demands that you accept and you promote certain things that are going against Islam. Don't fall victim to saying that I don't want to be that odd person out. I don't want to be the member of this coalition group. I don't want to be the one in this interfaith group who holds firm and say that this marriage, this institution of marriage, is for a man and for a woman and not two men or two women. Resist this push that is so spreading the world today, even in the Muslim world, in the Muslim communities. We find that very similar pressure is being applied against Muslims. And so I'm saying, be strange, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has told us, that Islam had come into this world as something strange, and it's going to return to being something strange. So if it means that you are strange in that way, that is the way for you to be strange. I'm so sorry. There were so many other things that I wanted to express, but I'm going to be quiet at this point. As I said, I feel really bad. You'll have to even listen to the sound of this. It sounds horrible to me. And so I know it has to sound bad to you to listen to the sound of my voice. Assalamu alaikum.